Hyalka territory is a lush land and the largest in the empire, hiding limitless potential and being a valuable asset that is difficult to refuse, especially for a deposed prince consort. With an uncertain future ahead, but for 15 years, she has thrived on the land called opportunity. This girl has lived carelessly, drowning in alcohol and tears for a long time. There were times she felt desperate. She clasped her hands and prayed, "Father, let me go back to the past. My little apple pie, I will turn you into the noblest woman of this kingdom. Please, please give me another chance." Yes, the little girl hugged her beloved father tightly. "So what about me, father? Father?" The girl suddenly froze as before her were the dried bones of a human. "Father! Father! Stop!" This memory, this face, her father faded away in her consciousness as she gradually woke up. Slowly opening her eyes and looking around, this is the residence of Count Lincoln. Then the body lying right before me, this is. It's true. It's my father, who passed away 15 years ago. I really have gone back to the past. The girl pondered dreamily about the things in front of her, as if they were all true. Lost in thought, the voice of the man behind her resounded, "Finally, you have regained consciousness, Rennie. You cried like a madman and even bit someone. Consort, why would you let others see you like that?" Rennie Lincoln's teary eyes revealed anger. Indeed, he was Prince Michael Alesh, the one who caused her such extreme misery. Many years ago, Count Lincoln, Rennie Lincoln's father, gave his daughter a gift. It was the highest position in the empire, Alan. So at the age of 12, Rennie Lincoln was engaged to the prince and was given a new title, the Prince Consort or wife of Michael Alesh. However, any political marriage like theirs had no affection between her and the prince. Jelicinia Canaria, the princess held hostage from the Canaria kingdom, enchanted the prince and made him brutally impose an unreasonable tyranny. "Prince, please stop importing salt from the Sarawak desert, and buy salt from our kingdom instead." She said bold words indeed. If done so, there will be riots in Sarawak. But because she has asked for it, then so be it, the prince replied gently. Some time later, indeed, there were riots in Sarawak due to dissatisfaction with recent monopoly agreements. Yet Michael just responded indifferently, "So what?" He was extremely shocked by the attitude of the ruler towards the future of the kingdom, that, "This is the king's order, requiring the prince to directly resolve this issue." Michael coldly replied, "If you want to solve such a matter, isn't it better to use an experienced general to quell the riots instead of me? Call Count Link, have him lead the troops instead." The old retired father accepted the command to go to war. However, he had a condition that the prince must rearrange his relationship with Canaria and focus entirely on the current consort. The father, for the sake of his daughter's position and his own honor, went to battle and perished far away on the battlefield. "Exactly, Rennie. I must make it official." Michael bowed deeply, each word resounding with authority. "I hope you will cancel the marriage." Drops of her bitter tears silently fell as she listened to the treacherous words. "Your Highness, is that what you should say in front of my father's coffin?" Michael only revealed a wicked smile. 15 years ago, Rennie Lincoln was still a pure and righteous girl. She only dared to whisper her grievances to him timidly. This time, reborn, she mocked herself. Why would you say such words in front of the corpse of the deceased instead of him? This time, also in this same place, Rennie Lincoln screamed in disgust. "He died because of the order issued by you, and now you dare to say such words in front of him?" Michael simply responded indifferently, "Of course, Rennie, I will compensate for your father's death. His loyalty and dedication deserve reward." He smirked disdainfully. "Let's see, I am also considering giving you a stipend, 1,000,000 Allen, and the Hyalka territory. Is that enough?" Rennie Lincoln sneered silently. "It's Hyalka territory again. Just like 15 years ago, but this time I won't yield to your family, you wretch." Rennie Lincoln shouted fiercely, "No. Blood debt must be paid with blood." Michael was surprised to see the once weak girl suddenly become furious. She was screaming in anger, "Bring out the life of Princess Canaria. My father died because of the princess's request, so at least her wrist should be cut so that I can relieve this anger." Michael yelled loudly, "What? This heartless monster!" Rennie Lincoln shouted loudly and rushed towards him with a crazy look. "If you don't like it, then give me your neck, Michael Allen. I have to cut it up for the dogs to eat. Only then can I relieve this hatred. You despicable beast!" Michael angrily shouted, "Rennie Lincoln, you insolent brat." With that, he slapped her hard, causing her to stagger and fall backwards. He continued to curse, "Every time you open your mouth, it's nonsense. I thought you only lost your father, but it seems you've lost your mind too." With that, he left hastily and didn't forget to mention the request to annul the marriage. While the prince was distracted, Rennie Lincoln grabbed her father's sword, then rushed straight towards him, silently praying, "Father, please give me a chance to tear Michael Allen's body apart." In a moment, Michael faced Rennie Lincoln's gaze filled with hatred, staring at him like an enemy. Along with the piercing pain that shot through his head, he screamed in extreme agony. The Lincoln family sword reflected his terrified face and the fresh, pungent smell of the villain's blood. He cried out for help, "Royal Guards! Quickly, seize that thing! She dares to stab me, Rennie!" Rennie Lincoln was still in a furious rage, shouting loudly, "Don't you dare call my name!" She drew her sword and screamed madly, "That is the precious name my father bestowed upon me." Swish! The sword pierced flesh, then there was silence. Just like that, Rennie Lincoln found herself back in the past, on the exact day 15 years ago when she was abandoned by her fiancé. 2 months later, at the royal palace. "Rennie Delphin Lincoln, you are stripped of your title as prince consort for the attempted murder of the prince." The king's authoritative voice rang in Rennie's ears, making her realize that this was reality, not a dream. She had truly returned to the past. Instead of receiving money and the prosperous Hialka territory, she knelt here as a criminal, stripped of all rights of the Link family, including the territory and assets, all seized by the wretched Michael. Yet in this second life, Rennie Lincoln had shattered one of that wretch's legs. What a worthwhile exchange! Thinking of this, she laughed maniacally. Michael, upon seeing her demeanor, was enraged. He shouted angrily, "Rennie Lincoln! Your arrogant family member is a criminal. Father! Do something about this madwoman!" The king furrowed his brows and whispered harshly to him, "Shut your mouth, you fool! Because of what your family and the little Canaria girl have done, the royal family's reputation has plummeted. Furthermore, the whole country mourns the death of Count Link, yet you still want to declare an annulment? Be thankful you're still a prince." Turning back to Rennie, the old king declared, "The only remaining property of Renlin Lincoln is the land to which you will be exiled, Leden territory of the Rennie family." She smirked contemptuously. Leden was her mother's territory. Unlike Hialka, it snowed 6 months out of the year, a barren and impoverished land. In truth, they wanted her to freeze to death on her way there. Rennie Lincoln silently thought, "Fine, so be it. In the place where you exile me, I will continue to survive and curse you, Allen." In the blinding snowstorm, Rennie shivered from the cold and endured the hollow words of the supervisor accompanying her convoy. He had climbed this dangerous snowy mountain with her for a whole month to reach Leden. Despite the remote journey, he readily agreed to follow along. Ah, so it was also a plot, she realized, unsurprised. Wait a moment. I need additional funds to return, don't I? Bring out everything you have, especially the sword at your waist, he began to demand. Rennie Lincoln firmly grasped the sword in her hand and declared, "This is the sword of the Link family. If your household dares to covet it, beware that even a slight touch could cost you your head. Well then, perhaps the head of a deposed prince consort will fall first, won't it?" With his words, a sharp blade pressed against Rennie's neck. She had to grit her teeth and relent. Survival is the #1 priority now. How could I discard the life my father helped me obtain once again? Agreed, she said coldly, with irritation evident in her voice. Here, take all my personal belongings and leave. The guard still wouldn't let go. Hold on, I told you to bring out everything you have. Saying this, he used his dirty hands to restrain her. Rennie Lincoln angrily jerked her hand away. I've given you everything, what more do you want? But he smirked deviously, saying, no, there's still one thing left. You look very valuable. If I don't get to taste you, I'll regret it. Pfft. A spit landed on the ruffian's face. Rennie Lincoln glared at him with disgust and retorted sharply, get lost. This only enraged him further. He gnashed his teeth in humiliation. Then, he delivered a painful punch to Rennie Lincoln, accompanied by curses. Rennie Lincoln screamed in agony as she was thrown to the ground, and he pulled her hair violently. I was planning to taste the prince consort, but now that's you. Even if you whine, there's only so much I'll tolerate. Despite her fear, Rennie Lincoln shouted back, you will surely regret this. She tried to scream, not wanting to die, at least not here. Suddenly, something flew at them. The guard, lightning fast, became motionless, only managing to utter, ah, before collapsing forward, his head covered in blood. Rennie Lincoln couldn't help but be stunned by the scene. What happened? Why did he suddenly fall like that? Was he hit by something? He seems to be in pain. Wait, now's not the time to think about that, I can't miss this opportunity. Thinking this, she raised her sword and yelled, die. The last escort also fell under the blade, ending his mission in this story deservedly. Rennie Lincoln gasped for breath, exclaiming internally, I did it. I did it. I'm still alive. She sheathed her sword and sat down heavily on the snowy ground, panting heavily. Before she could compose herself, Rennie Lincoln noticed something lying next to the fallen escort. Fruit? There's blood on it. Did he get hit by this thing? Rustle! Before she could think further, she heard a strange noise nearby, as if something was hiding behind the bushes. She raised her sword, ready to fight. Whoever doesn't want to die, show yourself. But there was no response until the noise came again, surprising Rennie Lincoln immensely. Behind that bush was a rather peculiar-looking boy with a sallow face. He looked emaciated, as if starved for days, with disheveled hair and a vacant expression, resembling a specter. Rennie Lincoln looked at him curiously, wondering, how can a child be here? Could he be from the savage tribes living in the northern mountains, as my father used to tell? They must be using the child as bait to capture humans for food during winter. Do they think I'll be fooled? With these thoughts, she gripped her sword tightly and yelled, stay away. If you dare to come closer, I'll strike. The boy hesitated for a moment at her threat, but instead of running away, he charged straight towards Rennie Lincoln. She shouted, I'm serious. Stay back. If you come any closer, I'll strike you. Ignoring her threats, the boy continued to approach. Although Rennie Lincoln didn't want to harm a child who had just saved her, her instincts took over, and her sword swung instinctively. Swoosh! Drops of blood splattered onto the white snow as the sword halted mid-air. Rennie Lincoln looked horrified as the boy caught the blade without flinching. Despite holding the sword with both hands, she began to tremble. The boy's incredible strength left her completely immobilized. Lowering the blade, the boy moved closer to her. He's coming closer like this. Rennie Lincoln trembled in fear. Since when had the boy tightly grasped her hand and seemed about to bite it? Rennie Lincoln could only grit her teeth, imagining her fate. This is not good. I'll be eaten by this brat. Suddenly, in the cold and silent space, a very faint noise echoed. Ren slowly opened her eyes to find herself safe. The boy was nibbling on her slender fingers like a small puppy. Although somewhat uncomfortable, it seemed the boy was caring for her wounds, even in places like between her fingers. Rennie Lincoln was surprised because she hadn't noticed those injuries on her hand before. Why did he lick his hand to heal the wounds, she pondered. Ren calmed down and hesitantly asked, "Was that you who threw?" The boy quickly nodded. "Oh, so the boy didn't mean to harm me," Rennie Lincoln said hesitantly and thanked him. The boy just stood there, staring at her blankly. He probably doesn't understand much, huh? Rennie Lincoln speculated about this wild child. Then she knelt down and slowly said, "Thank you for saving me." Suddenly, she noticed blood dripping from the boy's hand onto the snow. Rennie Lincoln felt guilty and hurried to find a way to treat his wounds. Under the freezing snow, Rennie Lincoln cursed the guard, as both the map and bandages were rendered unusable by his blood. Ha! This wretch dies, but still won't let go. The boy suddenly jumped up, shouting, "Ah! You called." Rennie Lincoln turned back to see the boy trembling, as if wanting to say something. Does he want to ask who called me, or something similar? Rennie Lincoln remembered that she had just said "ha" earlier, perhaps the boy misunderstood it as his name. She reached out to touch the boy, who instinctively recoiled and trembled, pleading, "Ah." Seeing the boy so frightened, Rennie Lincoln gently reassured, "I won't hurt you." He looked pitiful with that appearance, as if he had endured a childhood of mistreatment. Rennie Lincoln slowly extended her hand. At first, he was cautious, but then he realized her goodwill, so he stood still, waiting. Rennie Lincoln gently stroked his head with a friendly and gentle expression, saying, "Thank you." While the boy was staring blankly at his bandaged hand, Rennie Lincoln picked up the map and intended to continue the journey before sunset. Muttering to herself, "Although the direction is unclear, Leden seems to be in this direction." The boy suddenly rushed out to block her path. "No, not this way." Rennie Lincoln expressed her language differences. "What?" Then she remembered the savage tribe her father used to tell her about, who often used children as bait. This deduction sent a shiver down her spine, but she reassured herself, "No, don't be afraid. This child is doing this for me, so let's try to trust him and listen to what he says." Rennie Lincoln lowered her head and asked, "If it's not this way, then which way should we go?" The boy continued to mutter, "No, not this way," and pointed in another direction before darting off, "No, this way." Rennie Lincoln hurriedly called out, "Let's go together. I can't run as fast as you." Thus, 2 more hours passed, and the sky began to darken. Rennie Lincoln scanned the distance, and there it was, a castle. Finally, after many days of hardship, she had reached Leden. Looking back at the boy standing behind her, she remarked suspiciously, "Well, arriving faster than the map. How does he know the way?" However, they still had quite a distance to go, and tonight they had to take temporary refuge in a cave, as the snowfall was getting heavier and it was not advisable to descend the mountain. While Rennie was discussing their plans for the next day, the boy sat in a corner, quietly recording all of her actions. His dark, intelligent eyes widened with excitement and curiosity. Rennie let out a relaxed sigh as she finally managed to start a fire. When she turned back and saw the innocent look on the child's face, she exclaimed, "Wow, wow, wow." It turned out that this was the first time the boy had seen someone use a stone to make fire. Still a child, he held the stone as if it were a toy and played with it enthusiastically. Rennie looked at him with no less curiosity, truly fascinated by his reaction. "Not at all," the boy replied. It seemed that he only knew how to say that one phrase. Rennie Lincoln asked him again to confirm his language abilities. Meanwhile, the boy continued to play with the stone and replied, "Not at all." Rennie thought to herself that she would have to teach him how to speak properly after bringing him to Leden. Looking at the dirty child in front of her, she couldn't help but wonder, where did this child come from and what has he been through? It seemed that the boy was not like someone from the cannibal tribe her father had mentioned. Finally, they arrived at Leden. Leden was a desolate territory, and under the harsh weather of winter, it looked even more bleak and pitiful. While standing guard at the gate, a soldier was startled by the commotion below. Oh! The boy hesitated, seeming reluctant to enter the city. Meanwhile, Rennie Lincoln tried to calm him down. Stay calm, I don't know who you are, but you probably don't have anyone to look after you. Come with me. In Leden, the two of us will. But the boy didn't listen and tried to escape from her. Rennie Lincoln began to feel frustrated. Actually, this kid is too strong. I can't keep up with him. How can I calm him down? Suddenly, she noticed a man carrying a baguette outside the city gate, and her plan immediately came to mind. That's right, if it's food, maybe it will lure him. Thinking quickly, Rennie Lincoln hurried to the man, bought 2 baguettes, and after paying, she turned back to see how the boy was doing. Sure enough, she saw that he had stopped running, his innocent face truly captivated by the food. Rennie Lincoln mimicked eating the baguette and gestured, "You eat it like this." Then she tossed the baguette in front of the boy. Smelling the irresistible aroma, in the midst of hunger and cold, his eyes sparkled like a puppy's as he eagerly devoured the warm food. Rennie Lincoln chuckled with satisfaction. That's right, well done. Have another one. Blushing with happiness, the boy held the remaining baguette and looked at the girl in front of him, her kind eyes and golden hair shining like the sun. How adorable, that's what a good boy looks like. It's called bread. Rennie Lincoln happily explained to her new friend. The boy had his head stroked by the girl, his cheeks reddening even more. Bread, he repeated the new word he had learned. That's right, bread. If you come with me to my village, I'll give you even more bread. So come with me, okay? The boy shyly nodded his head, then finally took the soft hand and walked through the city gate with her. Good job, good boy, although it's hard to believe, I am the lord of this place. Rennie Lincoln happily walked and told stories to the child who didn't understand all the languages she was using. At Leden's mansion, a woman named Sarah came out to welcome Rennie. She seemed to be the steward of this mansion and had taken over managing everything on behalf of the lord. According to Sarah, the former lord of Leden has not visited this land for 20 years. Rennie Lincoln could only sigh inwardly, this place is truly pitiful compared to the Hyalka territory that she inherited from her past life. Leden only occupies 1/10 of the land area, and even this old and dilapidated mansion is nearly 300 years old. Moreover, snowfall persists for up to 6 months in a year, making food scarce. There are barely over 20 soldiers capable of defending this vast territory. Rennie Lincoln grimaced bitterly, at least there won't be any wars between territories, because no one bothers to pay attention to this barren land. She couldn't believe that the land belonging to her mother's Peden clan could be in such a position. Sarah mentioned that the former lord, Rennie's cousin, was born and raised in the bustling city of Viken, so he managed everything through delegated authority. During his lifetime, he only visited Leden 3 times. Rennie Lincoln thought to herself, in other words, she's hinting that a stranger like me shouldn't meddle in their affairs. But I won't let that happen, especially when that wretch Michael is still alive, and I haven't had my revenge yet. Rennie Lincoln's tone turned threatening, a deposed crown prince expelled from the capital for treason, isn't it, woman? It must be hard for your family now, with such a woman becoming the lord, isn't it? Sarah, both frightened and uncomfortable, replied, I didn't mean that. Why not? From now on, assist me in becoming the true lord of this place. Sarah hesitantly promised, I'll help you in any way I can, ma'am. Rennie Lincoln pointed to the boy beside her, the first thing I want you to do is to investigate this child. He saved my life even though he looks like an orphan. But try to find out his background first. And for now, take him to bathe. Sarah obediently followed the Lord's orders. Later, a maid tried to take the boy for a bath, but he resisted and ran away, angering the maid who shouted, You little devil! Stop right there! Not gonna happen, the boy only knew how to say that and ran off. Rennie Lincoln found this somewhat amusing and said, Look at that boy. Then, turning to the chasing servants, she teased, Hey kid, wanna come over here? No, no. Not gonna happen. Rennie Lincoln couldn't help but smirk at the sight of the struggling servants chasing after the boy. After a while, Sarah returned and informed the Lord about the child's background. Her face showed a hint of embarrassment. Actually, that boy is a Krona. Rennie Lincoln couldn't hide her shock. The boy is from the Krona lineage, a family that was massacred during the man raids. Krona? Could he be the crazy dog of Michael Alish from the previous life? She shivered involuntarily at the mention of that name. Well, Krona, he suddenly appeared one day and became a war hero for Alan Kess. He was known to be a hybrid with the bloodline of the man raids. But I know the truth about his lineage. He is not a hybrid with the man raids, but the illegitimate child of the Emperor. 17 years ago, when the Emperor was inspecting the northern lands, he had an affair with the daughter of the Krona clan and had a child. When the Empress learned of this, she was extremely jealous and furious, wanting the heir of the Emperor to be only Prince Michael. So she ordered the complete destruction of the Krona clan in a sea of flames, exterminating every member without leaving anyone alive. The Krona clan was accused of treason and had to endure a brutal massacre. From children to pregnant women, even livestock were not spared. Everyone thought Wild Krona was dead. But when Michael Alish turned 34, which was 10 years after his divorce, Michael brought him back to the palace. He fought fiercely on the battlefield and always emerged victorious. Everyone often called him the Mad Dog because of his absolute loyalty and the vast territory he brought to his master. But all these achievements were overshadowed by Michael's heavy-handedness instead of praising him as a war hero. Ignorant people only knew it was Michael Alish's accomplishment. And thus, Michael sat securely on the throne, receiving the love of all the people in this kingdom. Will Krona, a cursed name. I am confident that I can incite a rebellion. Remembering the previous life's memories when Hyalka was preparing for war, Wild Krona had come to her as if he had been ready beforehand, even though Hyalka had a well-trained army and vast wealth. Yet, against that man, Wild Krona, she still couldn't be confident when facing him. Back to reality, the boy was being groomed after his bath, his long hair being combed. Rennie Lincoln couldn't help but laugh at his adorable appearance. Look, you're even more handsome now. The servants behind were quite confused because the boy wouldn't let anyone touch him except Rennie. Looking at the innocent face sitting there, Rennie's hands unconsciously trembled. Well, Krona, a dark thought suddenly flashed through her mind. Now that you're done bathing, why don't we go to the dining room and enjoy some bread? The boy happily ran off upon hearing there was bread. Bread! Rennie Lincoln closed the door and sank into thought. If that boy is truly Will Krona, then in this life, Wild Krona will be on my side. You will become my knight, grow up in my embrace, and do everything as I say. She said to him, thank you, Will, no, I mean from now on your name will be Will Hump. Will Hump sounds good. His gentle demeanor made the boy blush. She stroked his head and silently thought about the treasure in her hands. Michael Alish definitely won't lay a hand on this child. In Will Hump's study, he felt very happy as the beautiful sister tied his hair. Even more surprising was that the child, emaciated from prolonged hunger, was only 16 years old. The long-term deprivation had made his body thin and small. He was even only a few years younger than Rennie Lincoln. Today is Thanksgiving, so Sarah took on the task of distributing food rations to the refugees. The winters in Leden are harsh, and without food supplies, the villagers would starve. Rennie Lincoln reviewed the available resources in the territory: salt, flour, dried beans. Oh, flour is so expensive. Oh right, corn can be grown here. Why don't we grind it into flour and distribute it to everyone? Sarah replied, that's a good idea, but we don't have enough manpower to do that. There are very few people living in this territory, so all resources are limited. Even counting all the able-bodied youths in Leden, there are not even 100 people. Even on Thanksgiving Day, instead of having a plump turkey like in the capital, the people of Leden only receive wild geese hunted by the guards. After the steward reported the situation and left, Rennie Lincoln felt extremely helpless. A impoverished territory to the point of misery. It's completely different from Hyalka, where she owned 3,000 soldiers each year getting new swords and shields. But now, she sighed at the records. This year the guard captain was rewarded with a bag of dried apples. If this continues, how will revenge ever be achieved? Rennie Lincoln cursed, damn it. Wild heard this and innocently responded, thinking she was calling his name. Rennie Lincoln quickly covered her mouth. Sorry, Will Hump, I wasn't talking to you. I promised not to swear in front of you, but it just slipped out. I'm sorry. The boy blushed in response to her sincere words, even though he didn't fully understand all the words. Wild Hump nodded and said, It's okay. Your meaning is no need to apologize? I understand you. Okay, now I will check your homework, Rennie said. When she looked at the piece of paper with scribbled words, cornmeal, soldiers, turkey, she thought, this kid is thinking about something else now. These aren't the things Sarah and I were talking about. Should I hire him as a secretary or in a similar position? Anyway, you did well. Will blushed again as his older sister stroked his head. A day as Lord in Leden is very difficult, having to manage food for the people and enduring their curious gazes, all because they heard rumors that she was crazy for losing her father and daring to draw a sword against the crown prince. Rennie Lincoln ignored the gossip, because those petty people who only believe in rumors are of no consequence. Thus, she had no choice but to homeschool Will Hump. One day, Will Hump knocked down a soldier while practicing swordsmanship. His physical strength was indeed extraordinary. Sensing something was wrong, he dropped his sword and rushed to hug her tightly in fear. No, it's not true. Rennie Lincoln patted his head reassuringly. Well done. In her heart, she was quite conflicted. Teaching letters and words she could handle, but swordsmanship, she couldn't, as there was no teacher for the boy. If he were with Michael, it would be different. He would easily find a teacher for Wild. But how would Michael handle it when he knew the child was the wild son of the emperor and raised him? Seeing the ring on the boy's finger, Rennie thought, a ring? Could it be a royal ring or something? What am I thinking? A mischievous spark flickered in Rennie's eyes before she stopped herself. Will suddenly showed her the paper he had written on, proudly displaying it. You finished writing? Good job, she praised, which left the boy dumbfounded. He replied, not really. Then he shyly sniffled, pushing back closer to her neck. Rennie couldn't understand his actions. What did you just do? But the boy blushed and ran off, leaving Rennie sitting alone in the room. She chuckled to herself, wow. That kid knows how to do those cute actions. The next morning, in the city of Leden, Rennie Lincoln was overjoyed because the territory would be welcoming a very important guest to her. A firm voice of a man echoed, Your Highness, may I humbly request an audience? The man with striking blue eyes, named Dimitry, a close friend of Rennie Lincoln, stood before her. Oh, it's wonderful to see you here, she exclaimed with great delight. Please forgive me for the delayed notice. As soon as I heard, I rushed here. Your Highness left the capital without an escort, but... Rennie Lincoln's eyes welled up with tears as she looked at her friend. Please don't say that. Your presence here brings me so much happiness. Dimitry smiled gently. As they reunited, Wild, who stood nearby observing, felt a tinge of jealousy brewing inside. Dimitry was a childhood friend whom I spent a lot of time playing with when I was a little girl. He was one of my father's most skilled knights, and also my first love, she recounted happily to Will. Later, when Will was led away, Dimitry wiped a tear from his eye and shared, I never thought the northern territories rumored to be so cold. When I crossed the last mountain, I feared your highness had been buried in the snow. He said to her. Rennie Lincoln responded cheerfully, that's not interesting at all. And as I've told you before, don't call me your highness anymore. Then what should I call you? You used to call me miss, before I got married, right? Dimitry began to lighten up after seeing that she was safe. Now that you have your authority back, Should I call you lady? Oh my, do as you please. Rennie teased. Yes, my lady. I mean, miss. Dimitry corrected himself with a chuckle. Shortly after their reunion, Dimitry began inquiring about the situation in Leden. I can see Miss is doing a great job. I was a bit worried because this territory seems quite barren. Rennie Lincoln replied, yes, compared to my time managing Hyalka. She caught herself mid-sentence, realizing she had almost mentioned her past life. Indeed, it's quite shocking here. I was used to living in luxury as the prince's consort, she added. What does Miss plan to do now? He asked. Rennie Lincoln hesitated at the question, then looked at Dimitry. Why are you so curious about this? She asked. The knight scratched his head awkwardly. Please forgive my question, it seems a bit forward. That's okay, just speak your mind, Rennie reassured him. Dimitry looked directly at her and said frankly, I suspect Miss still harbors feelings for the crown prince. The atmosphere suddenly fell silent. If Dimitry had come just a year later, I would have assumed he came to inquire about his health, but he arrived at this castle only a few months after I was deposed. That means he sought me out shortly after my arrival in Leden. The crown prince couldn't recover from the shock of being injured, so all the nobles in the kingdom must be cautious in their dealings with the emperor. Yet, despite all that, he still came here at this sensitive time. So, Dimitry, were you kicked out of your family? Or did you leave them to come here? Rennie asked straightforwardly, causing Dimitry to stutter a bit. Well, if you want to know, perhaps another time, he replied. Surely, your older brother kicked you out after you said you would leave the family, right? The perceptive young woman continued, making the young man uncomfortable. You're correct, Mississippi Michael Alish couldn't contain his excitement when he took over the Lincoln estate. When Miss became a prisoner, he attempted to seize the wealth of the Lincoln household. He not only sought to expand control over the territory, but also the soldiers. Wasn't the strength of the Lincoln family mainly from the military? I couldn't stand seeing that ruthless scoundrel controlling the Lincoln troops. So. At this point, Dimitry blushed. Rennie laughed heartily, ha ha. The former lord wants to make me laugh with all the things he's done. Despite her teasing, Rennie was truly happy that Dimitry wanted to demonstrate his loyalty to her. However, considering that he came here for her without any hesitation, she found it difficult to see such talent wasted in this desolate land. She felt sorry for that. Nevertheless, Dimitry remained confident that he could accomplish something. I've seen the roster before coming to Leden. This territory doesn't even have 50 guards, he said. Rennie corrected him, saying it's not even 30 yet. Dimitry grimaced, are you kidding me? Well, it's the truth. You'll have to accept it. Oh, the hardship, he exclaimed in frustration, which made Rennie a bit concerned. Could Dimitry be buried in this desolate land? Suddenly, she remembered when defeating the knight on that day. Wait! Isn't that boy in need of swordsmanship lessons? She quickly changed the subject. Instead of leading rebels, how about becoming a swordsmanship teacher? Dimitry was surprised. Excuse me, Mississippi. Did you just suggest that I teach swordsmanship to children? Almost. Didn't you see the boy sitting here earlier? He's in the dining hall now. Dimitry agreed, I guess I'll have to charge more than just a bag of flour for tutoring now. Rennie teased, how about a bag of flour and a side of goose meat for dinner tonight? You're not planning to reward me with that, are you? Dimitry, accustomed to luxurious living in the capital, showed his reluctance. You can endure hunger if you don't want to accept it. I don't have luxurious meals for an uninvited guest, Rennie retorted. Their intimate conversation warmed up the cold atmosphere of this northern mountainous region. The sunset began to cast its glow over the city of Leden. The boy was about to eat when he saw two people entering the dining hall looking for him. Wilhumpton, greetings. Rennie Lincoln and Dimitry approached him arm in arm, and she cheerfully introduced him to the boy. This is Dimitry. The guardsman glanced at Will with a serious expression, making the boy a bit wary. Rennie ordered Dimitry, the boy saved my life. Treat him kindly and be friendly. Sit next to him. He approached Will again and greeted him warmly, contrasting his previous demeanor. The boy immediately slammed the table and stood up, then stormed out of the room angrily, shooting a fierce glance at the unfamiliar young man before leaving. Both Dimitry and Rennie were not pleased with his behavior. However, she still tried to be as gentle as possible. Wilhumpton, you must eat. Come here and join me, she said. But it seemed that this coaxing method didn't work with the boy. Dimitry was quite annoyed. Let me go after him, the high-ranking knight whispered, but she stopped him. No, Wilhumpton is a child who has been mistreated. He will be afraid of unfamiliar adults. Let me try this. Dimitry was dumbfounded to see the lady he had known for many years playing such a prank. What are you doing? Rennie was playing with her food, teasingly tempting him like one would tease a hungry animal. Delicious. Absolutely delightful. She didn't forget to review the food in front of him as a lure. Each juicy piece of meat melted in her mouth, the seasoning just right on her tongue. It was so wonderful. Dimitry was getting exasperated, whispering continuously, "What are you doing?" "Believe me, this is a way to get the attention of a hungry child," she said confidently. It seemed she was wrong. Even with this trick, Wild still stayed behind the door, glaring at the unfamiliar man who was monopolizing his companion. Dimitry was quite amused by the lady's funny behavior. Still not enough? Anyone who sees his current expression would think you're raising a child. Well, I'll help you get his attention. With that, Dimitry poured milk sauce over his steak like Rennie was doing. But as soon as he turned back, he saw the boy leaving as fast as the wind. They had to continue their dinner without him. A few days later, Rennie Lincoln appeared very annoyed, looking at Wild. "You haven't left your room for 4 days now. You've been fasting since then. Is something wrong?" The boy just groaned. "No." She lost her patience. "Nothing? Come out now, or else." Then she suddenly turned to Dimitry. "How should we intimidate children of this age? How old is he? 16? That's crazy. How could that be possible?" Dimitry started to get annoyed. Rennie immediately reprimanded him. "Did you just curse his master?" He had to kneel down and apologize. No, I was just surprised that this boy is only 16. I thought so. He's too childish and skinny." Dimitry began to provoke. "What? Kids who are 16 are immature everywhere. There's no shortage of soldiers who look like miserable horses just because they don't eat much. A teenager who acts like a child will look smaller than a newborn foal. I have no words when I see this boy who is only 16. Will remained calm under the blanket, listening to all the derogatory remarks the stranger made about him. "When I was 16, I followed Duke Lincoln to the battlefield and took care of him," Dimitry sighed. Rennie Lincoln, upon hearing this, suddenly remembered the past. "Yes, you used to be his squire." Dimitry sighed. "Yes, all thanks to Miss Rennie's pampering and protection of the boy. It seems like you intended to coddle him like a child forever." She replied weakly. "No, it's not like that." "All right, leave it to me," Dimitry said, reaching under the blanket and grabbing Wild's leg, causing him to startle. He lifted the boy as if he were lifting a small cat and said sternly, "Wilhumpton is the name given to you by the Lord. You will never be worthy of that name if you behave like this." With that, he pushed Wild back to his original place. Rennie appeared concerned about his violence, but Dimitry continued his attack. "You're 16, aren't you?" He smirked. "When I was 18, I proposed to Rennie." As soon as he finished speaking, Rennie grabbed his hair and pulled it all out. "Are you crazy? Why would you say such things in front of a child?" He shrugged indifferently. "That's the truth. As they teased each other, they suddenly felt a heavy atmosphere behind them. Will was sitting upright on the bed. Wow, look at what you've done. You're very smart indeed. It doesn't matter how childish you look, a 16-year-old can be very arrogant. When you're 18, you'll still be sneaking around to watch Rennie like that, won't you? The boy seemed a bit shaken. No, I won't. Dimitry chuckled. Look at your eyes, show some respect and go to class. In Rennie's thoughts about Dimitry, he was a very caring and gentle young man, always so with her. Once she climbed a tree and accidentally slipped. Dimitry quickly rushed over and caught her. That moment Rennie would never forget. The young man was always concerned for her, overlooking all her foolish actions with a smile. Clearly, those memories and emotions were real. But now... Dimitry, what are you doing? Rennie exclaimed. Don't interfere with us, men have their own way of talking, Dimitry insisted firmly, showing his masculinity. Are you taking the boy away like this? Rennie worriedly protested. Dimitry responded coldly, I'll let him go and return. Rennie hesitated, looking at the boy struggling to break free from Dimitry. Although reluctant, she had to accept. Will Humpton, I'm sorry, but Dimitry will definitely become a good teacher for you. Listen to him and treat him with respect. With that, she gently kissed Will's forehead as if to encourage him. Will suddenly became dizzy, no longer stubborn but obedient like a puppy. Dimitry teased, Oh, that's too much, huh? What about the reward for the teacher? You've always been amazing, Rennie said teasingly but with a grateful expression towards her friend. Although it's a bit disappointing, those compliments aren't so bad. With that, he took Rennie's hand and placed a kiss on it. I will fulfill my duty, my lord, he said. Seeing these actions, Will couldn't hide his jealousy. It seemed that Dimitry easily understood the thoughts of the boy, as he laughed, leaving her slightly puzzled. What's so funny? Why are you laughing? Dimitry asked as he carried the boy away. Nothing, I'm leaving, he replied. Under the cold snowy sky, Wild had to endure intense swordsmanship classes. His new teacher was extremely strict, not tolerating unruly children. The Lord may be lenient with you, but I am not. Do you know why I always stay by Rennie Lincoln's side? It's not to tolerate brats like you. Dimitry said sternly. The boy didn't feel scared but instead looked directly at Dimitry, listening intently. I heard you saved the Lord's life on the way to Leden. How could a brat like you have the honor of saving the Lord's life? I will make you worthy of that honor. Because that's what he wants. Get up and move if you understand my words. As soon as he finished speaking, a wooden sword was in the boy's hand. Wild gritted his teeth, gripping the sword tightly, and quickly took a fighting stance. Seeing the boy so determined, Dimitry felt satisfied. He thought to himself, leaving the Empire to convince Rennie to come to this cold land was worth it. Anyway, the day we left the Empire is long gone. Just a few weeks after arriving in Leden, the people here admired the strong and brave knight named Dimitry. It seemed that he was very friendly and well-liked by the people here. Rennie felt happy about this, but she also felt a little sad because the Lord had been in Leden for 2 months and was still being shunned by everyone. Rennie, Will's call from behind echoed as she turned around. There stood Wild, appearing tidier and more polished, with his hair cut short and a slightly bashful expression on his face. Rennie Lincoln chuckled, Oh my, Will Humpton, what happened to your hair? Did Dimitry cut it for you? Looks like you've been nibbled by mice. Rennie's teasing expression made Will Hump blush in embarrassment. Rennie gently motioned for the boy to sit down and said, Come here, let me trim your hair for you. When Dimitry criticized Will for being 16 and still not knowing how to speak or wield a sword, he felt the need to correct and groom such a young boy carefully. She thought Dimitry just wanted an excuse to bully the kid, but now the boy's demeanor had improved significantly, and he could speak more. Rennie Lincoln felt everything had gotten much better. Kid, you're not weird, on the contrary, you're cute. Cute? Rennie Lincoln gently reminded, just a little trim will make you even cuter. Come on, be good and sit still. The blushing boy nodded and obeyed. Locks of hair fell slowly. Rennie seemed to be doing this job quite well, even though it was her first time cutting someone else's hair. Yet she was still confident that she was better than Dimitry. Ha ha! Dimitry, seeing the boy in this state, banged the table and laughed loudly. What's this? Just returned from military service, huh? The boy blushed and replied, no, not at all. Not at all? You've been beaten like that and still can't fix your way of speaking, he grumbled at will. Rennie Lincoln blushed in anger at the comments on her first hairdressing work. Looks weird, huh? She tried to stop him from teasing the boy. Dimitry said, I got it, and playfully slapped his forehead. Wild Humpton, it's a pleasure to meet your swollen forehead, kiddo. Will Hump pushed him aside in frustration. She kept reminding, I told you not to tease Will anymore. After a few minutes, the meal was served. The menu consisted of boiled potatoes and oatmeal porridge with corn, sounding quite dreadful in this freezing cold. Though Dimitry had anticipated this, he couldn't help but express his surprise. Quite a diet there. Rennie Lincoln replied, that's already luxurious for this winter. Even the kid sitting next to you never complains about the meal. I didn't mean it that way, he pulled Will Hump closer and argued, if you want this kid to grow up fast and handsome like me, he needs to eat more meat. Rennie frowned, pondering. He was right, but what could she do? Suddenly, an idea flashed in her mind. That's right, if I give Will the amount of meat I've saved, maybe. Dimitry exclaimed, are you kidding me? If this were in the capital, you'd be bedridden for 6 months. But here, with the weather so cold. Will nodded in agreement with him. Rennie persisted stubbornly, but I don't feel cold. Dimitry raised a finger to silence her. Try taking off your cloak and then talk. Don't quack like a duck. Will was somewhat stunned by his actions, then he made a stubborn face until he returned to his original position. And I'm thinking of going hunting in winter. It seemed that the women had said too much before hearing all the necessary things. Hunting? Yes, with this boy here. Will was startled by Dimitry's suggestion. Rennie objected in a raised voice, how can such a little boy go hunting? After hearing these words, Will felt melancholic. Hey little one, are you really that small? Wild shook his head in confusion at the teasing, which made Dimitry laugh heartily. You look so sad, how can you be? He also said he's already grown up. She's still worried like a mother always thinking her child is too small. Furthermore, right now, there aren't enough guards to protect the castle, but there's no other way. Rennie sighed, please don't let the elk trample you to death. At the well of the mansion, Will was staring blankly at the strange object called a toothbrush in his hand. The reason he had to use this cumbersome thing was that Dimitry had threatened that if Will didn't brush his teeth, he'd be the first on the list for the elk hunting tomorrow. Lost in thought, Will heard Rennie calling. She recounted how she used to hate brushing her teeth too. But because her father said that if her teeth were clean, even if the prince came to propose, he'd run away. At this point, she felt a little sad, suddenly thinking, I never thought I'd one day hit the prince's foot. Wild softly asked if Rennie didn't like it either. Of course. I hate men who don't brush their teeth. Rennie replied sharply. Upon hearing this, Will immediately began vigorously brushing his teeth. She looked at the boy and thought to herself, Dimitry says I treat a 16-year-old boy like a 6-year-old child. But he's so cute like this, how can I treat him like an adult? Seeing that Will had finished brushing his teeth, Rennie approached to inspect. Her fingers glided over his white, baby teeth, making Wild feel embarrassed and shy. Well done, all clean now, she praised gently, patting his head. You did well. That night, Rennie let him stay in her room and told him fairy tales about the elk Hansi, the goddess of vengeance who hated the elk, and Altia, the goddess of peace and prosperity. Altia would lull Hansi to sleep on the elk's back, traveling the world to share peace and prosperity. If the winter suddenly became warm, people would say that Altia had put Hansi to sleep. But after those warm days, there would inevitably be huge snowstorms due to Hansi's anger. Dimitry interrupted, "That's not something to tell children. It's too noisy, I only know this story," Rennie snapped. Will chimed in, "Yes, yes. If Hansi sleeps, the weather becomes mild, so Altia has to lull her to sleep on the elk's back and wander the world for 21 nights, sharing peace and warmth. If you think about it, without Hansi, there wouldn't be spring. What's wrong with that? If Hansi could give birth, what did she and Altia do while sleeping together for 21 nights? Dimitry asked, provokingly. Rennie's face suddenly turned red, she quickly covered Wild's ears with her hand, and Dimitry mocked, "Too late." Rennie shouted loudly, but only heard Dimitry's laughter echoing throughout the mansion. Late one evening many years ago, when Dimitry was just a 6-year-old boy, Lord Lincoln had adopted a 4-year-old girl with eyes and hair as golden as the sun. Since then, she had been the little lady whom the boy always protected. Despite being the second son of a divine lord in the wealthy count's castle, Dimitry was always treated equally with his younger sister. At that time, the count used to tell fairy tales to both Dimitry and his sister before bedtime. Dimitry was not only Rennie's playmate but also a source of support for the faction of the little lady while living in the count's family. Rennie's current actions were exactly like those of the count, from embracing, holding hands, kissing the boy's forehead, to telling him fairy tales. All these actions came from the count. He involuntarily spoke slowly, "I just want to ask one thing, little lady. Do you remember your father through that kid?" Rennie replied sadly, "Our father has passed away." Dimitry spoke softly, "No, little lady, if you can forget, then do so. If you can forget by loving that child, then do it." Rennie Lincoln became stunned. She admitted, "Well, Krona is really good. When a child becomes better after following me, behaving as if I had forgotten my father is the truth. But I can't forget the reason I accepted Will Krona." Her trembling hands clutched the corner of her dress. "If I could forget by stabbing that wretch's foot, then I would have done it long ago." After hearing her sincere story, Will fell into a deep sleep on her warm thigh. Dimitry got angry and approached to wake the boy. "Hey, wake up, little one. You have to go back to your own room and sleep." The boy was still in a drowsy state, mumbling, "DMI, stray." Dimitry crossed his arms and grumpily exclaimed, "Heavens, you've said it wrong again. When will you learn to pronounce the heavy syllables properly?" Rennie gently stroked the boy's head. "All right, Will Humpton, if your hunt goes well, I'll allow you to call me Rennie. It'll be easier to pronounce." Will Humpton didn't say much, just blushed and nodded in agreement. The next day, Dimitry and Wild, along with 6 members of the guard team, carried out their mission. Within just a week, they caught a giant elk, and it was said to be due to Will's skill. That winter saw 2 major snowstorms. Except for a few dozen who got lost and froze to death, Leden territory remained peaceful. 2 months later, at the Leden mansion, Rennie Lincoln was quietly contemplating the future of this land. Despite enduring a harsh winter, Leden was still impoverished and lacking in everything, especially money. In her past life's contract, after 3 more years, there would be a massive fire in the northeastern region, so extensive that it would take a year to completely extinguish the flames, nearly wiping out the entire area. This region, already cold and dry, posed a high risk of forest fires. But what made the situation particularly ominous was the peat. It crystallized from the old leaves mixed with the layer of mud underneath, floating on the marsh and solidifying into easily flammable coal. No one knew that buried peat in the marsh could cause the fire to spread so extensively. Rennie Lincoln reminded herself that she must prevent the forest fire from happening. If they could sell the peat, it would provide a substantial source of income. However, the marshland didn't belong to their territory. How to obtain the right to exploit Slayland Marsh became her pondering. As she was lost in thought, she suddenly heard the voice of the boy calling her, Rennie. When she turned around, she saw a radiant young man looking at her with confident eyes. It's been a while since we met, Wild Humpton. What's the matter? Wild seemed awkward as he conversed with her. Dimitry arrived at the horse stable. He's saying there's something he wants. Wild, she interrupted, causing the boy to blush slightly, and she reminded him, when speaking to someone, you need to stand close and look into their eyes, okay? The boy hesitantly responded, yes. Rennie thought to herself that it had been 2 seasons already, and yet, the boy still lacked communication skills. Clearly, he needed more coaching. She continued to advise, and also, you must use formal language with Dimitry. Will Humpton reluctantly turned his face away, seemingly discontent. Here we go again, she gently tapped his cheek with her finger, speaking softly, Dimitry is your teacher. With that, she remembered that it had been a long time since she had met the boy alone. Dimitry had always been with him throughout the winter. He said that Will Humpton had to pay for the elk he had eaten, so he couldn't leave the training camp. Occasionally, on very cold days, I called the boy into my warmest room in the castle, but Dimitry was not pleased with this. He argued that it wasn't appropriate for a former princess to bring a boy into her room, fearing that malicious rumors might spread. I think he's right. However, it seems that he's particularly strict with Will Humpton. After a moment of contemplation, Rennie Lincoln came up with a plausible hypothesis. Could it be because he resembles a younger brother? After all, Dimitry only has one older brother. But regardless, the boy is growing up so fast, the scars on his chin and neck have disappeared. How did Dimitry mold him into who he is now? It's good, I also like those broad, sturdy shoulders. And, of course, that beautiful face. Rennie Lincoln reached out and lightly touched the boy's face. Now, he had grown significantly taller, and he blushed slightly at her intimate gesture. In her previous life, Rennie Lincoln had only met Wild Krona once, when she advised him to tear apart Michael for his own benefit. In a fleeting moment, she noticed the scar above his eyebrow. In the second life, the scar was in the same position. Rennie Lincoln grew more convinced of his identity. This child cannot be anyone else but Wild Krona. Her recent touch had left Will Humpton extremely embarrassed. Oh, I'm sorry for standing so close. It's okay. Will Humpton continued, blushing, we're close like this, it's fine. This action reminded her of a previous incident when Dimitry complained about the boy's behavior. She had told him that being intimate with him wasn't appropriate, and Dimitry shouldn't do it. Thinking about this, Rennie Lincoln chuckled softly, that's right, what's wrong with it? She patted Will Humpton's bottom playfully, like comforting a child. The boy immediately jumped and blushed. Hey, why are you getting so close? Wild exclaimed. It's okay. He then took her hand, pulled her closer, and embraced Rennie Lincoln tightly. This sudden action made her blush with embarrassment. Oh my! Why did he have to do this, especially when I'm wearing this thin dress? I can feel everywhere he touches. His body is so warm, probably just returned from training at the training camp. It took a while before Will Humpton released her from the warm hug. He blushed and asked, was it okay? Rennie Lincoln smiled gently, of course. She continued to hold him close, if not you, then who else would I be close to here? At the horse stable, Dimitry had something important to discuss with the Lord. Rennie, the conscription order has been issued from the capital. What? Why here? Rennie was startled. Yes, he looked worried, I don't know why it's come here either. I guess they must hate me, she guessed, impatient, tell me quickly. Dimitry sighed, they probably hate me too. A total of 30 soldiers have been conscripted. 30? Rennie couldn't believe her ears. Didn't that number represent all the soldiers in Leden? Dimitry added, out of those 30, I'm the only official knight. If all the soldiers are handed over to the conscription order, Leden will have no defenders, and it will be a serious offense if we don't provide enough troops to the emperor. What would Rennie do to save Leden and her friends now? If you enjoyed the story, please like and subscribe to the channel to follow the next developments in this series.